What's up, my friends? How's everybody doing today? What's going on? Hope everybody's having a good week. Yeah, let's adjust that light. We're gonna figure this lighting situation out. Um, yeah, so let's jump right in. Uh, we're gonna be talking about um, goals today, right? And the importance of setting them. So it's just easy for people to start setting goals at the beginning of the year. It sort of signifies, hey, last year was this, next year I'm going to do that, you know. But I think goal setting is really good for any time period. You want to obviously give the opportunity for you to achieve goals. You don't want to necessarily, you always want to set stretch, very achievable, and I guess low hanging fruit to some degree, because you do want to make sure that you're actually hitting, the bogeys that you're setting. No pun intended with the golf reference there, even though it wasn't a golf reference. So anyway, yeah, I mean, that's the idea, is goal setting. And we're actually going to be doing a goal setting session upcoming, that's going to be launched within the channel very soon. But let's jump right in. So goal setting in any profession, business, personal endeavor, sport, you name it, there's always the most successful people have set goals. And it's important, kind of no matter what you're doing, to set goals so that you have something to work towards. And I think part of the biggest importance is it centers your focus points. And I just want to say, the intent of our channel and content, obviously, some of it is for entertainment, but most of it is for, if we can help just one person, or help one person get better at golf, or help them, figure out an idea that they didn't think of before, even if it's small. Small things lead to big things. Lots of big things started small. So that's the intent here. That's what we're trying to do. So anyway, going back to the goals piece, right? In any endeavor in general, if you want to succeed, more, so to speak, than the bare minimum, at some point you're going to have to work towards a goal. Now, maybe you don't consciously have a, sit down, set goals. That's not something that you've done yet, but somewhere in there, if it's in business, like, hey, I want to get all my work done by Thursday at 3. So Friday will be really good. I mean, that is still technically a goal. It's not necessarily income or revenue driven or what have you, but it's certainly still a goal that's going to hone in your focus, because if you achieve that goal, then you get, Friday off if you're leaving or whatever. So that almost becomes a habit. So, the goal setting, working really hard, being really diligent, then you move on and then you accomplish something, and boom, you got Fridays off. It's, they're really good habits. Goal setting is something great to get into. What we're going to talk about today is the importance and how it pertains to golf. Now, it doesn't necessarily matter that if you're, a regular golfer, a high handicap, low handicap, you're just learning. It doesn't really matter. Goal setting in any of those capacities would be really, really beneficial. So the reason why I say that is, let's take a beginning golfer, right? There's so much that you get blasted with when you're first starting to golf. And it can be overwhelming, as in any, situation that you're new at, where there's a lot of, detail, things to do, etc. You're excited. And, first we look at the big picture, and the idea is, hey, I want to be able to play golf and not get super frustrated all the time, or I want to be able to hit the ball consistently. So then we take this big picture goal and we break it down into, much smaller things. And maybe at first, if you're going into something new, you don't always know what exactly that you need to set as far as specific goals, but we still have an idea. So we break it down. We go, okay, I'm a beginning golfer. I want to hit the ball consistently. I don't want to whiff it or I don't want to shank it or whatever, right? How do I do that? Well, I have my big picture goal, right? And I would like to do this by next week. Probably not going to happen. So we have to make sure that it's reasonable. But a reasonable goal is in 6 months. Our stretch goal is in 4 months, right? So now we have something very achievable. And then if we get really determined and things go our way, we don't hit a lot of hiccups, we have our stretch goal, right? Also very achievable. So then we break it down and we go, okay, I need to set a solid foundation. So based on, this is somebody saying this, based on the research that I've done, because it is going to take some effort on your part to make sure that you know the goals that you ideally would need to set. So based on the research that I've done, I know that I need a really good posture and setup. I know that. I know that I need clubs that are appropriate for what's up, man? What's going on? I need clubs that are appropriate for my height. Maybe it doesn't have to be perfectly measured. Probably at that point, it doesn't necessarily make sense to walk into, a fitter, spend a bunch of money and because you're going to, change so much over the next, 4, 6 year, et cetera, that you're not there yet. But I got to get clubs. I got to get a posture. I have to play, right? I have to actually practice. How can I do that? So now we've just broken one big goal into at least 3 different things. One of which is, okay, I need a good posture. I need to do that. So how do I do that? Whether or not you're seeking out coaching, whether or not you're looking on videos, et cetera, that'll be one way to get that done. The second is I need clubs. Well, that's pretty easy. You go in, you can get clubs. Maybe you don't have any. If you have a 20-year-old set and they're too short or you're hunched over and it kind of doesn't feel natural to you, maybe it would be time to upgrade that. And then the third part is, well, I need to practice. Then, we break that down again and go, okay, so we're going to practice 3 times a week and I need to try to get X, Y, and Z done, right? So those are, even though, they're somewhat baseline goals, they're still really important to accomplish your overall piece. Now, if you're first starting out and you say, okay, I want to be a scratch golfer by the end of this year, that's, unless you're Tiger Woods, that's probably not a great goal to set because it's so unlikely to occur given the difficulty and practice and getting there and et cetera. I mean, it's possible. Some people, they do have the ability to just like pick up the club and they have this natural ability, but it still takes time to, hone all that in. So my point of saying that is we have one goal that, even though seems really baseline, is certainly achievable. And then we can break it down into various steps. And then we have another goal that's basically like something so outlandish that probably, even if you break it down in the most granular way and, set up hours in the day and minutes and how you're going to get there and, travel routes and to, maximize time and all the rest, the big picture goal is probably still it's not even a stretch. It's like, probably not achievable given the difficulty of golf. That's not, an ideal way to set goals. So we have the idea again is big picture goals that are maybe aren't a crazy stretch in the sense of being big picture, but either a timeline or how to do it. That's where you're getting the stretch from. And then as you get better, let's say as a golfer, so now you've hit your goal and it's month 5. Well, that's great. You just hit your goal of hitting it, not whiffing it and hitting the ball consistently. So now you have a new set of goals. Well, I want to, hit the ball better. I want to hit it further or whatever. And we kind of take the same process. But even though we have the big picture piece, we then, build up into the big picture piece with, the more baseline things. But as you get better and as things increase, then we move on, and the complexity of your goals will grow with the complexity of skill, right? So we also want to make sure we're matching that up, where probably a tour player is going, I want to win a tournament. How do I win a tournament? And then they already have all the baseline things, right? So what they're going and they're looking at, well, I have all these stats, right? Because they're tracked automatically. Where am I making the most? Where am I losing the most? When I'm in contention, what is happening and why am I not, taking it over? And some of it is, hey, it's a mental thing. There's so much pressure and you just have to get over that. And that kind of happens. Of course, setting a goal, you can't, I don't know if you can exactly set a goal and be like, hey, I want to win this per se, if you've never been in contention. But now, for example, probably Sam Ryder, maybe Sam Ryder's like, I want to win something. But in order to get to the goal of, hey, I want to win, first it might have been, I want to get in contention. There's not necessarily, especially in golf, there's not necessarily a major gap that you're going to complete without getting through some, of the smaller pieces. It's like, I want to go from a 20 to a 0 in a season. Generally speaking, it's in anything like that, but it's so challenging to make such an enormous gap, because a 20 to a 10, which I think we talked about last week, but a 20 to a 10 is pretty doable. And you can definitely do that within a season. And then, post that, a 10 to a 5, even though the jump is smaller, it starts to get a little harder to make that jump. And then from a 5 to a 0, you can get from probably a 5 to a 2, but then the 0 to, the 2 to the 0, that's a pretty big gap, just because the dispersion needs to be, it's not, even though it's not at a 20, the dispersion is here. And then at a 10, it's here. And then at a 5, it's there. And then you get to a 2 and it's here. But the last, 1 or 2 or 5% of that is so difficult, because you're boiling down to maybe 3 strokes, 3 strokes around, where it's, hey, I'm shooting 75 all the time, but I want to shoot 72. I want to shoot even. But the 75 is still a really good score, but shooting even is really hard because of how much, you need. It's like eliminating, those extra mistakes that are starting to get challenging to eliminate. So anyway, circling back to the pro piece, it's like, sure, you definitely have some people that like go on tour and they're like, I want to win. And it happens. It's definitely doable. But I think for the most part, there's incremental, large incremental goals that are big picture, then it's broken down, and then you hit that goal, and then the complexity or, the specificity in what you're looking to do maybe narrows a little bit, but that next hurdle is, even more challenging, right? So it maybe is less of a jump, but in order to navigate it, the maze of navigating it, whatever analogy, so to speak, is that much more to get through, even though the actual path, so to speak, from point now B to C is shorter. The road from B to C is just that much harder. So in golf, golf is tremendously hard. It's pretty funny. You have so many of these star or GOAT athletes that were in other sports and they gravitate towards golf. And then they tackle golf, and it's like, I'm the GOAT in basketball. And then they pick up golf, and it's like the progress that's being made from this freak athlete is like nowhere. Even though, all the resources, et cetera, or, you could probably think of who I might be referencing to some degree, or, football, like Tom Brady, like to go comes the golf. Well, we've seen him golf. I'm not saying it's bad, but it's so interesting when you're coming from such a different sport, people coming at you, much more plays, et cetera, to like what appears to be this, mundane, you know, less, there's not people coming to tackle you, and it's a little white ball, and it's like the bane of your existence on the worst days. Let's see. Used to be around scratch growing up when I played a lot, 7, 8 in a row, partly due to the putting vibes 2 years ago. Got this year to get rid of the yips. Yeah. I mean, so those are little goals. Thanks for posting that in there. So I mean, in something like that, it's like, okay, you kind of have identified a potential issue, right? It doesn't sound like it's ball striking. It sounds like it's something, touchy, meaning around the green, something that takes a little bit more feel. So, and that in golf, at some point when your ball striking reaches a certain, level, it definitely focuses and becomes more of a short game and, scoring area. So in your case, it's like, well, how do I do that? Well, I have to eliminate the yips. Well, how do I eliminate the yips? Certainly, obviously, practice, looking at adjustment, kind of part of that is, yips can be a little mental to some degree. It can just be a comfort level. It can be, kind of like busting through it all in between the years. Yeah, I agree. It totally is. But that's like, it's like a great goal to set, where it's like, even when you're setting a goal in that scenario, it's even possible where if you're setting a goal and you're like, I'm gonna say I need to get better at chipping, and I'm gonna get better at chipping because I'm gonna do this. Or, you know, at least for me personally, at the end of last year, I I use high lofted clubs around the greens, which works for me. But if you really want to excel in chipping on a regular basis, because no one's Phil Mickelson except Phil Mickelson. He's the only guy who's really played successfully for that long using high lofted clubs around the greens. Everybody else, it's much lower because the predictability coming out of grass, et cetera, is much better. So it's like, even for you, Sandy, where, like I have the yips, I need to do this. Well, maybe it's a change in dynamic in how you're going about, doing that action, whether or not it's chipping. Sometimes with yips, using like an 8 iron or a 7 iron to bump and run, kind of get away from that, because you can almost do a putting stroke, versus, using a club, and then you get more comfortable. I mean, Matt Fitzpatrick is the U.S. Open winner 2022, and he chips crosshand. Now, I don't know the backstory on why he does that, but I would guess it's not because he was ultra comfortable over the ball with a normal setup. It had something to do with probably feel, but even the change in how that works was, okay, I feel more comfortable over the ball, and he stuck with it. Now, he is definitely a traditional player where if you're chipping crosshand, you can't really play it high. It's usually more bump and run oriented than, higher lofted, running into the greens. But I mean, his short game it's incredible, and his putting is like out of control. But yeah, it's weird because no yips at all chipping. Oh, just with the putter. Okay. Sorry about that. So I would say on the putter front, do you use a blade putter? I'm just waiting for a response. So while he's doing that, so with the putter, and we're going to be, our newest team member, Brian, is going to be doing a little tutorial on various types of putters, the necks, how that works. Putting, there is a huge technical aspect of putting where we think a ton about how we impact the ball, like in a driver, hitting up on it, left, right, negative. Let's see, and only around not practice used to putt with a blade, switch to a new true ball this year. Okay. So there's a lot of technicality in putting that is sort of now bursting on the scene, where we have the TrackMan for all the irons, driver, woods, etc., right? Wedges. So putting, there is, an optimal path and how, the toe hang and the weighting and face balance and the neck height, all that. Blade is the heat. I can't chip though. Yeah. Um, so in that regard, right? Even the switch now for you, Sandy, um, even the switch to the two ball, right? The way that the two ball looks, it's gonna be versus a blade, it's gonna be hard to twist the face, right? So with the yips with a blade, to some degree, I agree, it's easy when you, like, if you're out 5 feet, maybe a little longer, like 10 feet, it feels really good to putt. But sometimes when we're in the 1 to 2 foot range, and depending on the optics of how the putt looks or how it breaks or the speed of the greens, especially if they're faster, with the blade, like, it's easier because the blade, you do have more of an arc versus a two ball or a spider. It's more this way versus a blade or a mallet, it's opening and shutting. On shorter putts, it can be hard sometimes to have awareness of how the face is coming in. And especially if, you end up making a shorter stroke, etc., you change your tempo, things like that. That is, I would say, leads to the yips. So you miss one or two 18 inches and then you're getting over it. Me personally, I've had that where, like, I'll miss a 1 foot putt. I'll kind of lose my mind about it, but I have to get over it while having a good round. And then again, that circles back to the difference of, like, a 5 to a 0, you can't do that, or a 0 to a plus. Those are the things you basically can't do. Like, it's and you have to make your 3/4. But anyway, so with the blade and the optics, you miss a couple of those, you get into that funk. It's really hard to get out of it, right? And it's a matter of basically, like, I'm not going to worry if I would say with the yips, the two ball, definitely on one thing, you'll probably have an easier time. It's harder to twist the face with it because it's literally just, it's supposed to move this way versus that way, right? But it's basically if it's over a 2 footer, I don't know if, let's just say it's over a 2 footer. The notion that you'll have to break through is, hey, I'm not going to worry about blowing it by. And you're just going to focus on the stroke. So even that, as far as a goal, where it's like, even in ball striking, and we're going to get to chipping in a second here, Mr. Dogfather. Even with, 0 to 7 feet. Okay, so even in that regard, I don't know if you're blowing it by, if you're leaving it short. It's really, and this is what I've lost my train of thought. Sorry. So with sometimes what can help is with a goal, and a goal doesn't necessarily have to be a tangible outcome, meaning I want to make more pars. It can be a feeling or a thought. I don't want to worry about where the ball goes. I just want to focus on nailing the setup and trusting my swing. That's what I want to focus on. So sometimes with the yips in putting or chipping, if it's less about where the ball ends up and it's more, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I'm comfortable over the shot. Once I'm comfortable over the shot, I'm going to commit to it. And it doesn't matter what happens after that. I am hitting my goal if I'm making the stroke that I want, if I know that I'm lined up, or with a chip, if I committed to this, I know that I'm lined up right, the ball position is correct, etc. That's what I'm going to do. Dogfather, do you blade it, chili dip it? What happens there? So while we're waiting, ball position in chipping can actually make you blade it, chunk it, etc. Because even though we don't think about it, more blades than anything else, it is possible that when you set up to the ball could be either too far forward or too far back. Now, if you're blading it a lot, my guess is, which might be counterintuitive, you actually might want to move the ball up in your stance a little bit. There's a common notion that with chipping, you have to put the ball further back in your stance. But the issue, just like with ball striking, right, is if it's too far back in your stance, and let's say you have a square stance, right, what can happen is you're moving down on the ball, okay? But I'll get a club. We live here, baby. So you're moving down here on the ball, right? And what can happen is if the ball is too far back in your stance and you have a square stance, you're moving, the club face might be a little open. So if you're moving down, the ball's too far back, you might get jammed up and not be able to actually freely flow in or close the face, right? So I would guess, I don't know if the ball is too far back. Do you feel the ball is too far back in your stance? More blades. I rarely hit the ball twice. I think I flipped the club forward in the front of the ball. Okay. So 2 things on that. Definitely check ball position. Next time you're out there, almost open your stance up a little bit, right? The other piece is, if you're blading it, you might be either too far leaning on your back foot or on your front foot. I know that's I would make the weight more neutral. So there's a lot of instruction that's like, lean forward on your front foot and keep your hands upright and you'll hit it perfect. That's not really the case. The other piece with blading is try taking a lower lofted club and keeping it on the front neckline, opening up your stance a little bit, and make sure that your stance is neutral. Okay. And I know that when I've seen your swing, you tend to, you pick up the club, it's pretty vertical right away, which could also be a piece. So you're coming in too vertical and it's too steep even for a chip. And, you're kind of hitting across it too much. What I might consider is trying to bring it, more around. But the first thing on chipping and yips is ball position can be a big deal. I would recommend trying the ball position more forward. And if you are choking up on it a lot, do that less. That's another piece where you don't necessarily need to grip way down on the club. You can have sort of like a more neutral, like slightly, like maybe 1 or 2 fingers down on the grip. But that's what I would say. And the other piece is, Usually with blading, it can also be a tempo thing where you're going back and you're trying to accelerate through to maybe not, do that. No, or not, make sure you don't, dip it. Be more patient, be patient with the chip, let it go up kind of and let it flow down. You don't have to up down fast. The whole thing with like I have to accelerate 24/7 is not the case. Same thing with putting. Chipping and putting, you can have more tempo there. And when you're more tempoed, the club will want to square up and flow a little bit more easily. Um, just take a little more club and have a lower ball flight. Yes. I think in general, the reason why, if we're talking about like a flop shot, right? We're trying to get under it. So a lot of conditions have to be met in order to make a really good flop shot. Have it up and straight down. Then if you have a chip, which I'm just classifying as, still pretty high trajectory, not a lot of run out, you still have to have the same thing because if you're in the grass, if you're in the rough, for example, you have to compete with how the ball is going to move up and down the face. So it makes it even more unpredictable. Where if you're a little low or a little high, it can dictate something flying out or it can dictate something out coming dead. So like when we see on TV, it's like, oh yeah, you hit it high in the face or hit it low in the face. Like they're obviously the pros. It certainly happens. It can happen to anybody, but you're constantly competing with that. So it's just a matter of probability wise. If you're, really, really, really comfortable and really, really good at chipping, and that's what you're going to do, or you're always going to commit to it, etc., it's one thing. But even if you do all that, it's still a lower probability shot than taking, if you normally. So I'll just in my own example, it's like I just play it higher. I want to get it lower, not because what I'm doing with higher is bad necessarily, but coming out of the rough or and even out of the fairway, it takes a little practice because you have to understand the run out. But the predictability on bouncing forward, you can actually read the green a little bit more, and the way that it'll interact with the face is a lot more predictable. So the reaction of the ball also is more predictable. So if you have a shot, you're the pin's way back, you're in the front of the green, and there's really no issues. If you're somebody who can't take, let's say, a 9-iron and bump and run it, right? And you're always hitting sand wedge, that's nice, but then here's the thing, like you have to hit a harder sand wedge, right? And let's say you're getting trajectory right most of the time, but because you're landing it closer to the pin, sometimes you're going to get a hard bounce. Sometimes the ball is going to bounce and stop where it is, and boom, you're going to be great. And then other times you're going to not get any rollout and you're going to land it too short because you don't want to go long, and then you're stuck versus a 9-iron or like a pitching wedge that's a little bit more and then will roll out. You can predict that because you're not competing with quite as many factors. You have the ability, like, hey, this is going to run out by 10 feet. And if you pick your landing spot X amount, and then you hit that landing spot, and most of the time it's going to roll out within a foot or two of that. Versus a sand wedge, you have to be even more precise with the landing spot. You do have to make good contact, even if it's out of the fairway. And then the other piece too, which isn't quite as big of a deal, but you are taking a bigger swing. So like when you take a medium size or like a medium size or short to medium size swing or move, right? You certainly more things can happen, but the other piece of that is spin. So you're coming out of the fairway, it's still pretty predictable, but sometimes you clip it a little too well. And okay, you're like stuck and you hit it too well and you're like, damn, I hit a good shot and it didn't roll out. So what went from an easy birdie or an easy par to like, I got to grind. Then same with a 9-iron. Once you practice it, it's not like you're just going to pick it up and like, boom, hey, this is great. Once you practice it and get a feeling for it, maybe you're not, dunking it every once in a while, but the likelihood of you getting within 2 to 3 feet pretty often is a lot higher than if you're taking a higher lofted club, trying to pick the perfect distance and competing with the other things, because the spin off a 9-iron, generally speaking, is a lot more predictable than it is off a sand wedge, even out of the fairway. Just because of the distance and whatnot, etc. So it's just more predictability. So when you see the pros and they're getting like some of the crazy short game people, they have all the shots, but they're always going to choose unless it's Phil, they're always going to choose bump and run over like chip it really close. But that's another piece when you see like courses that are ultra soft, they're flying it all the way there because they have their distances so dialed in to, proximity to the pin, where it's going to land, etc., that's why they eat up soft courses. And that's why you see like such crazy low rounds. Because even on the chipping, it's like, hey, I can be more aggressive. I'm comfortable with a 3-footer. I'm going to take my chances getting closer to the pin, etc., etc. So again, circling back, goal-wise, yip-wise, ball position, and that goes actually with putting too. But I would suggest on the putting and on the chipping is I'm not going to be concerned about where the ball ends up. All I want to get concerned about is, am I nailing the setup, ball position, etc., and did I make a good stroke? Because either on both of them, whether or not it's ball striking, anything, when the ball leaves the club, there's a ton of things that can happen, right? So as soon as it leaves the club, you lose all control, right? You're just like doing your best to maneuver within the options that you have pre-ball leaving the club, one of which is, did I get my setup? Did I commit to the shot? Did I make did I make the swing that I committed to? Did I commit to the shot that I wanted? Now, maybe it doesn't happen, but that doesn't really matter. You have zero control over that. So again, circling back to goal setting, I would set take the next 3 months, right? And for most of us, we're not in golf season yet, but we got the club's tournament for IRL Las Vegas. Super exciting. Set some goals. Hey, what do I want to do over the next 3 months, right? Can I hit that? Put it down on paper. And another suggestion too, find a friend that you can do this with. So like take it seriously if you take what you want to do seriously. So take it. So just as an example, which is you'll see this session coming in soon, but it's the first time last year where with a friend, Brian, who's our newest team member, and we did a goal session. And it was like, here are the certain goals that I want to hit. And they were really specific. They were in each category. It was like ball striking. What do I want to do on ball striking? I want to do X. I really want to focus on my scoring. 150 and in, I want to hit I want to be at that pin. That's my goal. Tournaments, like what do I want to do in the tournaments? Like where am I expecting to place? Like qualifying, things like that. Putting, it's kind of like highlighting what you have. And I would even take it one step further if you're going to go with a friend and say, what are some elements that I want to focus on? Which still lines up with goals, but it's like, instead of having sort of zero direction on what you want to do, because you could always work on driver, you could always work on irons, you can always work on wedges, you could always work on putting. You could always work on looking like a boss at the club. But I would say, like, I really want to get my driver. I want to be so good off the tee. That's one of my main focus points. And well, when I go to the course, I want to feel comfortable on the tee. Like I'm always nervous on the first tee. I want to feel good. Well, how do I feel good? Well, I need to make sure that my warm up is X, or like I'm feeling good about something. So like really, really dial it in, really get specific, right? And I mean, again, there's some big picture stuff. Then from the big picture items, you break down what you're going to do for that. And it can be per segment, like per big picture goal. Um, and then, you escalate, or create new sets there. But, be specific, be granular. And I think the other pieces too, sounds super tacky, but you gotta believe in yourself. Like golf is unbelievably challenging. It's probably one of the most challenging sports to achieve at, where you can be unbelievably athletic, right? And it doesn't mean that you can pick up a golf club and do something great with a golf club. Versus if you're unbelievably athletic, oftentimes you can pick up a baseball, a football. You can run real fast. Like you can do all that stuff, agility. But the golf is one of those things where that doesn't necessarily translate. And I think that there's some really great examples out there of, like we talked about before, GOAT athletes in their respective sports that hit a serious wall within golf. And it seems like kind of no matter what they do, they can't like move forward at it. Now, maybe part of it is them, but meaning they, don't want to take the action. But anyway, goal setting, really important. Be specific, set a big picture goal, break down that big picture goal. And then on top of that, within the big picture, or, have like multiple segments, and then, 2 or 3 or 4, however many you want, goals, and then really track it. And then the reason why you do it with a friend is it's one thing to even write it down or say it to yourself or note it in your phone. But it's another thing to have a serious conversation with a friend and say, here's what I want to do. Because I can tell you, like when I told Brian that, like what's my fantasy goal? Like, well, playing in the US Open. Like saying it out loud, I felt a little silly because I'm like, the likelihood of me qualifying for the US Open is like 10%, probably less. That was last year. Maybe it's 10.5% this year. But hey, it's still a fantasy goal of mine, and why the F shouldn't I say it? But by me saying it, I'm putting it out there and somebody else is hearing it. And then we circle back to it. And even though it was one of those like basically unrealistic goals, it was still out there and you still put it on there. So you have those, but just make sure that you have some of the other things. And then also when you're saying it out loud, you can circle back and like find somebody, it's whether it's a golfing, probably should be a golfing friend, where, you check in. And then you should note it. So it's like you do a beginning session now and say, what are my 2023 goals? And again, if you're just beginning in golf, it's probably like, hey, I want to hit this. My goal is to caddy for you. Yes, I love that. Yes, let's hit that goal. That would be crazy. But that's what you focus on, right? So again, if you're beginning in golf, it might be like, hey, I want to hit the ball, and then you keep going, you keep revisiting. But if you're past that point, I think that you can do something more than that and be like, in my ball striking, I want to do the tee. How am I going to do the tee? Well, this is what I need to practice, and this is probably what I need to do. In, my mental game, what's like when I'm out on the course and I'm having a really good day, and then like I fold, what happens? How do I avoid that? Like I want to break through that wall. Because all it takes is once. You break through that wall once, and then you move on, and then suddenly that's not a wall anymore. And then you move on, to the next piece there. And then it's what are actual, accomplishments that I want to do. I want to win my league. How am I going to win my league? And then it's also game wise. What are some things that I want to work on my wedges? Do I want to work on my putting? How am I going to get proximity to the hole? Like I want to get comfortable chipping. Like I want to be able to walk up to a chip and like not think twice about it. One more thing on the chipping piece, if you have the yips, as a breaking away on the yip piece, set up to the ball, and as you're going through your normal routine, whatever that may be, pull the trigger about 1/3 early, or like it could be a second early, but it's like, okay, I'm setting up something. Oh, suddenly you're going, and it basically disrupts the notion of, oh shit, I'm gonna hit, hit a blade, and you're just like, oh, I better make this stroke, and then you do that a bunch of times, you kind of break through the wall, and then suddenly you don't need to do it anymore. So that's another piece to kind of break it. Similar on putting, pull the trigger, pull it back a second and a half early. I'd highly recommend not doing the Sergio thing, closing your eyes. I think that's pretty ludicrous. Like he's been a long time, amazing ball striker, obviously spotty putter, but can't figure it out. It's kind of weird, kind of like an Adam Scott guy, where it's like this guy's just he is an ageless wonder, crazy ball striker, and they did away with the anchoring, and he just fell off. Now he's doing better. He doesn't practice that much, right? So that's another piece. But some of the mental stuff is like wild. Thoughts on looking directly at the ball, maybe in front of it. I think stuff like that is trial and error, and do something that it could work for you. Hey, you look in front of the ball and you're feeling good. I think the idea is to get you away from the thought about yips. Because when you step up to the ball, you're like, man, I'm not going to hit a good putt. And that's like the first thing that you're thinking of. I'm not going to hit it. Something bad's going to happen, whatever it may be. So it makes you uneasy, tense, and then you're like not unable to do something, but you inevitably don't do what you want to do. And then it's basically, quote unquote, a self-fulfilling prophecy, where it's like you thought it and you're like, yeah, I have the yips, but it gets reinforced every time. And then it gets into this vicious like cycle of that. So whatever it is, looking in front of the ball, it's the same thing with kind of shanks, right? Like we've all seen Tin Cup. When the caddy like puts the voodoo thing on him and he's like, oh, I'm done with shanks. It's like, obviously it had zero to do with whatever this guy said. Per what you said earlier, it was all between the ears. And now, I'm not thinking about that right now. And like for that split second, I was not tense, and I broke through that barrier. And now it's not really much of a barrier. Like maybe you're nervous a few times afterwards, but as soon as you kind of get some momentum going that way, I think it's not easy, but you get the momentum moving in the right direction, far, far, far away from yips, and then suddenly the yips are way in the rearview mirror, and you're headed to the club's IRL in Vegas. So that's what I would say. Trial and error. Also, yips even though yips can come from the mental piece, yips do come from you not feeling comfortable or feeling jerky over a stroke or a chip. That's why, referencing ball position is a piece of that, where like if it's too far back, it'll make you more jerky, versus if it's too far forward, you're at the very least not jerky. You'll be able to free flow, through it. Like I can putt with a wedge and no yip, but putter in my hand, I'm screwed. So you must be deep in the abyss of yips. The two ball will probably help, but you'll have to do like tin cup caddy voodoo stuff, which is, I guess, you could try closing your eyes. I just think it's like so toolish that Sergio did that. Obviously, hashtag not a fan of Sergio Garcia, but that's what I would say. The two ball is going to help. Try putting your ball position way far forward, like just in practice. What do you do? What do you like jam up and hit it left? Is that what happens with the putter? So anyway, while we wait, ball position, chipping, lower, switching up a club. Sometimes that's what it takes. Practice, I don't yip. Okay. In course, while you're playing, check ball position, pull the trigger early. Pull it back earlier than what you're ready. You might miss it still anyway, but I think in our goal setting of avoiding yips and getting away from that, the first thing that we need to do is we do not need to worry about making the putt. We need to worry about you not being in yip mentality. So change out that ball position. You got the two ball, and pull it back a second early. And if you want to experiment with looking before or after the ball, I'd do that too. Or, turn your head and look at the club and look at the hole. Some people do that too. I don't know that will, jar you out of this, but it could. Let's see. But I practiced right before my wrist basically freak out and open way up. That is probably ball position. I would guess you play it right in the middle of your stance. Yes, ball position. You're yipping because you're ball position. Basically it's probably drifted too far back, and I don't know if you're square or closed, but if you're not basically dead straight, having it too far back, especially with a blade putter, because again, with a blade putter, it needs to release. So if this is where the ball is, right? And you're pulling the putter back. It was a blade putter. Well, think about if the ball is here and you're putting a nice stroke on it, it doesn't have time to release, because then what you'll do is, I got to jam up, or stop and try to close the face, and it goes left. So you're saying it goes right, but if the ball position is here or here, for the time being while you're playing, and again, the goal in mind here is to get you out of the yips, put the ball up here. So it's going to feel like real, real weird, but you will be able to free flow with your stroke. And then you'll bust through it, and then you can readjust your ball position. Where should my hands be in relation to the putter head when I move the ball forward? So let me get a putter. So I think you can see me here, right? If you're putting here as a blade putter, right? You're putting this way, you could jam up. Your hands you shouldn't, be like this. Move it with the putter, right? So if this is where it normally is, and again, this isn't a permanent thing, it's just to get you out of the yips. I would do it right there, right? And then you'll just be more free flowing in how you're swiping the ball. So yeah, cool. Any other questions before we wrap up here? And thanks for tuning in. I appreciate it. We're just going to talk and talk and talk. Talk, 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 talk. hopefully this helps people who got it, going to give it a try. Man, I'll just say in wrapping up, I can't wait. I'm jealous. It's obviously like sifting through and reposting things and whatnot. You got it, my man. Thank you. I can't wait for the season in like people in warm climates right now that are able to play. Like it's awesome. I have a field. You too, my man. Thank you. There's a field that has like our college stadium right here. So when it's warm out, I'll go over and I'll like strike balls, and I'm like, yeah, man, like plus threes in the mix, feeling like super good. And then I recognize that it's still the beginning of February and it's so far away. And obviously, there's a peak in everybody's season. So don't want to peak in like the middle of February. So that's another piece too. But I rarely go cold as far as like not hitting balls or like not doing something. Like I might not hit balls for a little while, but um, I'm definitely taking swings in my living room on the cat toy tour because I don't have anything else to hit. So I just swipe some cat toys, grind on the swing there. So anyway, thanks, appreciate it, and we'll see you next time. And make sure if you see the other videos, you got some good stuff out there. Make sure to give it a whirl. In probably 4 years. Wow. Well, I bet we're gonna when we hit IRL Vegas that I'm gonna be like grinding all season because that's just what I do, and I'll shoot like even par 1 under. And you're gonna come out, and you're like, man, I haven't practiced. Like, yeah, I got rid of the putting yips, and you shoot like 3 under. I'm gonna be like, what? But you know what? I'll be happy for you, sort of. Just kidding. I'll be happy for you. That'll be great. All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Have a good night. That background on the wall is so fire. Oh, up here? Yeah, yeah. Hey, want to see something cool real quick? More stuff is inbound, but I wanted to have a Hyperion made, and it was going to be like outrageously expensive. So this thing came in. I saw this thing. I was like, "Hey, can you paint it gold, like like my NFT PFP?" And I got this guy, so I'll be hanging this right up on the wall. All right, thanks everyone. Appreciate you tuning in. As always, a pleasure. We'll see you in the clubhouse. Have a good night.